Okay, yes, I know, I am sorry. I missed out on the press screening for this movie because I clearly don't get invites for that. And I was busy and sick for the rest of the week. Give me a break, come on. Although I did get to have a picture with Adorable right here. Woo woo. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So Godzilla, King of the Monsters is the follow-up to Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla, which follows the human beings after the events of the first movie as they try to search for solutions to achieve peace despite the existence of the Titans. And as for the Titans, however, it's more of fighting against each other to know who's the alpha, like the best of the best, and that's just about it. It's the closest thing I can think of in describing the movie without really diving into spoiler territory. But right off the bat, I'm gonna say that I can't simply say that this one is better than Godzilla 2014, but I also can't say that this one's worse. It would all depend on what and how the audience want to approach this movie. If you expect a much simpler and sensible plot in a Godzilla movie, then you can't go wrong with the 2014 Godzilla. But if you want a movie with a plot that does not just go along with the story arc of the monsters, but rather is built upon it, then this movie is for you. Before I continue with the comparisons, let's talk first as to what I loved in this movie and what I didn't. Let's dive right into the movie's greatest aspects, the human characters. But seriously, even though they are the lowest parts of the movie, some did manage to do a good job in standing out against the others. For example, I love Millie Bobby Brown's character, as she brings depth to a child conflicted with the situation she's in, and she actually has a darker story arc than you probably think. Along with Vera Farmiga's character, which portrays a mother who is blinded by her past, which made her do some tough calls in this movie for the sake of their future, of course. And both have acted it believably on screen, and that's why I love them. For Kyle Chandler, though, I'm actually in the middle with the character that he is portraying. I mean, he did well with the part, but I just find something with this character that's a bit off, which I couldn't really explain. Characters like Dr. Sarazawa, and surprisingly, Alan Jonah, were standouts in this movie despite the number of their appearances throughout. As for the others, they were pretty much serviceable, or I just couldn't remember, because come on, who are we kidding here? We didn't come for the humans, we came for the monsters! It's the best I could do.
You're just a freak.
Yes, baby! The Titans that we were promised in this movie, they all go at it in an all-out fashion, and I loved it. The design for the Titans were actually really impressive. From Rodan, to King Ghidorah, to Mothra, and of course to Godzilla himself. They look photorealistic for the most parts in the movie. The designs for the other monsters as well that were introduced in this movie, they also looked fantastic, although the CGI work done for most of their appearances were minor compared to the main Titans. But either way, I'm not complaining, okay? Because 98% of this movie was a huge CGI spectacle. And the world building in this movie was terrific. It never felt like Universal's way of setting up a cinematic universe, but it wasn't also in the same level as with the MCU. It's probably more in line with the world building that was displayed in John Wick Chapter 2. It wasn't on the face, it was subtle, and it was relevant. Not to mention, one I'd die to live in. And when they throw down hard. Although, Gareth Edwards still get the credits for making Godzilla much more terrifying if you base it on scale. But here, it's more of the intensity of each scenes that the monsters are present, whether if they're just passing by, lighting skies, or fighting tries. This movie is also as colorful as it gets. It plays with the color palettes more often than I expected, which surprisingly helped complement the movie because it knows that it's not the gritty origin movie that Gareth has introduced. They're done with that arc and they're moving over to the next step in the franchise. Which also brings me to the soundtrack, which was phenomenal for me. To casual viewers, it would probably be a mixed bag for them because some of the tracks may feel off for them, but as a Godzilla fan, it's pure fan service. I swear to God, as soon as Godzilla first popped up on screen and the speakers were like dun 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 dun, I was like, oh my god, they're doing it. They are really doing it. Although they changed some aspects to it to make it feel modern, and I still appreciate what they did because they're trying to cater the most die-hard fans in the franchise and to the most modern audiences in the franchise as well. It's all about evolution in production, really. But such great things don't always stay that way. Can't believe I said that. As much as this movie offers, it also has its flaws. One of which was about 40% of the plot that doesn't really make sense. Like, characters in this movie, even ones that I've mentioned earlier, had probably a scene or two that made them make questionable calls. I won't spoil what they were. I want you to see it for yourself and judge them. It's not a huge deal breaker for a movie like Godzilla because classic Godzilla movies never really focused on the human plot, but more on the kaiju's plot, which made this movie more inclined with the classic ones. I mean, come on. If someone were to ask me what exactly the main plot of Godzilla Final Wars was, I'd probably be answering Godzilla fighting off 10 monsters. That's it. But I wouldn't say that the plot was non-existent in this movie because, as I said earlier, this movie's plot doesn't revolve around the monsters, but rather it's built upon them. It's like the difference between a building's foundation and a building's construction process. If the building is the movie's plot itself, as it is being constructed, the building just enters into a passive state, changing its form as to how it's being constructed, kind of like the Godzilla 2014 version, because Godzilla was the one constructing the plot all throughout the movie. But if the building itself is in the process of setting its foundation, then the construction process would change as it would depend upon the building's foundation, which is kind of the plot of Godzilla King of the Monsters because Gojira and the other monsters are the foundation of the plot moving forward. That's just my take on the issue. Speaking of issues, some of the fight scenes, although they look great and all, some were really choppily edited. Also, as I said, 98% of the movie was a total CGI spectacle, but the other 2% were terrible, okay? And those were displayed on major scenes in the movie, which made it worse. I wanted more of the Titans fighting against each other. Not that it fell short on the action on the third act, but it was off-putting at times because it suddenly cuts back to the human characters and their plot progress, which kind of bummed me at times. I was like, bring me back to the holy cash. In the end, Godzilla King of the Monsters, albeit not having the worst plot ever in cinema history, it didn't also have the greatest. Plus the added minor issues that occur in between the movie. But if you're willing to let those pass because it's either you're a Godzilla fan or you're just someone looking for something worthwhile, then this movie is for you. With that said, if I have to rate Godzilla for how it is, and me as a Godzilla fan, it's an easy fan-freaking-tastic, it's no doubt. But as a regular moviegoer that enjoys watching movies, but is also critical at points that may seem logical and illogical, Godzilla King of the Monsters as a movie is rewatchable till I die. But really though, it's hard for me to explain what kind of movie this one really is and to what audience it would successfully cater, but in my opinion it goes like this. If you're a moviegoer who loves Godzilla and its lore, you'll love this movie. If you're simply a moviegoer without any knowledge of the Godzilla lore, but have plans in starting to know more about the lore, this is a great introduction for you. But if you're a moviegoer who is looking for a great story, sensible plot, and just a perfect cinematic experience, well, you'd be disappointed. Or if you're none of those, then why the hell would you So, Godzilla King of the Monsters, have you seen it? What are your thoughts about it? And whatever your thoughts may be, comment it down below and do as what follows. Give a like, share, and subscribe. See you all in the next video.